Well, welcome to episode 11 of season 2 of C.A.R.s, Coffee and Christ, our weekly podcast discussion with our team here at Automotive, Royale. And I'm your host, Ross Turner. And as always, I serve as the host of this podcast and also as the corporate chaplain here at C.A.R. Well, in our episode today, it should be a fun one and really a lot about what we do here, what we're about in our philosophy and our mission at C.A.R. But we're going to discuss the theme of building. What is building about? And what's the difference between building in our culture and building the kingdom of God? That's going to be really the focus today. And really, why are we as humans builders? Why is that such a vital part of who we are and what we do? And how does that play into what God has called us to do in this culture at this time? So with me today to discuss our topic, our co-founders, co-owners, Joshua and Abigail King are with us this morning. And we also have our technician and our body paint guy, Chris LaFond, with us, who's been making such awesome contributions to the podcast these last few weeks. We're so thankful to have Chris with us this morning. And we're excited to jump into this subject matter this morning of building. Well, I thought I'd start by just sharing a very, very brief story about, it was a graduation ceremony for my child's preschool. They do that now. Apparently, they have graduation ceremonies for 3 and 4-year-olds. But I was at the preschool at my daughter's graduation ceremony many years ago, and the teachers asked all the kids, of course, a great question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, apart from my daughter's answer, which was a mermaid, which was an incredible answer, I thought was the greatest answer I've ever heard, and I really hope it comes true. But for the rest of them, they had all these interesting answers, but the majority of them, strangely enough, answered, I want to be a builder. That's how they answered it. And I thought, conceptually, that was very interesting to me as I heard that. It wasn't as if someone told them to say that. It wasn't like they heard that from something. But somehow, conceptually, in their hearts, they saw that that's what they were called to do, to build. And it was not just one, it was like 5 or 6 of the kids, boys and girls. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think that sets us up pretty well for the first question this morning is why is building such a vital part of what it means to be a human? We're always building stuff. We're cultivating things, we're building things, we're growing things. It seems to be embedded into what we are and what we're called to be. So why is building such a vital part? Not work per se, but building. Why is that so important to being a human? What do you all think? Very simple question this morning to start us off so early. But does anyone want to jump in and try to answer that question? Why are we called to be builders as human beings? What do you all think?
What I think is interesting is you kind of see both. We have one of our little family mottos that we say, and that we have the kids say all the time, is that we are builders, not breakers.
Yeah.
Because kids can be pretty destructive sometimes.
Sure.
Whether that is with their bodies and physically what they're doing, or with their words, right? Or with their attitudes. And when you interact with people that are not building up, it feels bad.
Yeah.
Whether that is you're interacting with somebody that is gossiping or tearing someone down. I think it's easy to get caught up in that, but at the same time, it never feels great.
Yeah.
Right? And so I feel that because God is so creative, He's put that creativity in each of us and that building aspect in each of us, whether that is as a kid growing up and just being attracted to Legos automatically. You don't have to teach a kid, hey, this is the only way to play with Legos. Yeah. You just let them loose and they will come up with builds themselves. Yeah. Or whether that is playing in the dirt as children. Kids will find a way to be creative. They will find a way to build things, forts, mud pies, whatever it may be. It's that innate thing in us that I believe, because God is creative, He's placed that in us.
That's great, Abby. I think absolutely. It seems there's something to be taught about it, right? But it's innately part of who we are. And I love the analogy to Legos. I have a student of mine in one of the youth groups I've served in, and he loves Legos. But it's like the ones that love them the most. It's so fun because they'll use the maps and the tutorials and stuff to build what they're supposed to build first, and then they just go nuts after that. Then they just build whatever they want to build. They go off the script after that, right? Because I think there's something inside us that wants to go beyond that, in a sense, because that's part of who God is, in a sense. Absolutely. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think, if you go back to our origin story, we serve a God that is a builder.
Yeah.
He is a master builder. Made the heavens, made earth, things that we marvel at. We're all built. They were all first imagined in his mind, and then he spoke. Yeah. And he also crafted us from clay. Right. Think about the kids in the dirt. We were made from clay.
Yeah.
So we were first sculpted and made. And so there's just something intrinsic about our origin of that. And then I think also, doing as your father does. So many people grow up and they become a lot like their parents, and so are we, right? But I do think it's a choice. I think there's a choice that you make in life. That's why we try to instill building, not breaking. People either choose the path of cynicism, or they choose the path of tearing people down or gossiping, or they choose the path of building people up and being positive, being an encourager. And they choose to do something with their hands, like Chris has chosen to do, to make things beautiful and to build and to construct something that is of worth and value. Yeah. Or they choose to, tear that down, or do things that are destructive and contrary to that. And so you kind of see those series of choices playing out on earth as this great battle between the builders and the breakers.
Absolutely.
Over time. And so I think it is also a choice. I think innate in children who are innocent is this great desire to do good, that life hits you and starts, shifting that course away from what is good. And I don't think you start there. I think you end there, but I think it is a choice, and I think it is also part of our, origin story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how, in the beginning, chapters of the Bible, like you're referencing Josh's, God builds this man. Adam means from the earth. It's kind of like in the Hebrew means like kind of out of the ground. But then it says that he takes from the side of man and he creates woman. And then literally there's this kind of expression of Adam of woe. This is well built, basically, is what the Bible's kind of getting at when Eve is made. So it's again kind of this interesting concept of look at how God builds things. It's in responding to that is like, wow, he's calling me to do the same thing, whether it's naming the creatures or tending to the garden or building in the garden. These things are all conceptually kind of embedded into who we are as part of God's nature himself. So again, that's kind of part of what we're supposed to do and who we are, which is why I think, you look at the history of humanity, it's a lot of building. There's a lot of building going on. So I think it'd be good for us to might ask the question now of what are the building blocks and materials per se of building a good business or just building a good life in a sense. What are the right building blocks or materials that go into building something that's well made? What do you all think?
A while ago, the Lord gave me a strategy around building businesses that were just some basic principles. I think one of them is being a river and not a pond. Either pouring out into the business for growth or pouring into people. And a pond being a defensive strategy where I'm going to try to retain as many resources as I can and hold them back for fear of failure or fear of going under. It's a very conservative thinking of I'm going to hold and protect. And so but this was more, hey, trust in the Lord. Rivers, rain comes to the mountain. The rain is provided by God. In the cycles he's put into place, and he controls those cycles. And then from that comes the water, and then the water comes down the mountain, which again, so much symbolic to the Bible. where, God kind of talks to his people on the mountains, and, that comes down in the form of water with words. So anyways, the water comes down, but then it doesn't stay in a place. It's meant to move. It is watering everything in its path, but it is meant to move to the mouth of the river or the place of its actual destination. And so, building businesses that flow into good places, and whether for society, good food, good services. If you're in a food industry, blessing the people around you and constantly taking what has been given and pushing it through so that it can continue to be better and better and better and better for people and communities. And I think some of the best businesses flow into their communities and better their surroundings as they're there. Let it flow out. I think another one is building for permanence. So a lot of times you can think of a sprint. I see this a lot with startups, and why over 90% of them fail is they're given so much initially, but bootstrapping, you actually, I think you'll probably see a different statistic there, where people have to go through hardship to get to the place. You see the same thing in plants. So if you water a plant immensely in the early days of its life, especially palm trees, you can look this up. You can look up pictures of palm trees that just had tons of water. Their owners think it's really good. They're giving them tons of water. They didn't have to dig. They didn't have to find the roots that were deep into the earth, and therefore they get really shallow roots. I don't have to dig deep. It doesn't have to be hard. With startups, a lot of times I see this a lot in tech is, they're given so much money up front from investors or VC firms. They never had to struggle in the initial days. So they build what they think is good without having to learn what is good through hardship and through innovation and through grinding it out. And on the contrary, you see, and I was just talking to another business leader about this, the blessing of constraint inside a business. So either constraining yourselves through discipline, and disciplined practices, or just the nature of trying to get a business off the ground and bootstrapping in small businesses creates tremendous innovation and things like that. But when you're building, always thinking about permanence, thinking about the long term, not the short term gains that may seem nice that month, treating customers right, being honest. That's one of our biggest differentiators in our business is just integrity, because everyone else is looking at short-term gains and we're looking at, the kingdom and long-term construction. So sometimes you have to sacrifice the short-term dollar for the long-term gain. So, building for permanence is another one. And I also think another way in thinking, the final principle that the Lord taught me was building companies under people. What is that person excellent at? And can I build a division under them? Can I build a part of the company under them? Can I surround them with resources that elevate their gift, instead of trying to form them into a role or a drone type of mode, Like, what is it, studying people, learning about people, and understanding what are they gifted in, what are their strengths, and then pivoting the business around them instead of pivoting them to the business cookie cutter model of the business. I think too many times businesses will try to recipe it, and so just some there's these principles, these precepts that you can either gain from the word, Proverbs is full of wisdom there, but just for me, those are a few of the ones I think are really important for business.
That's great, Josh. I love how you, especially at the very end, how you share that, the goal of people is to find a way to, plant them, essentially, instead of just make them a piece of a cog, right?
Yeah, like a plant.
There's a sense of they're this vital, vibrant, living thing. They do need to be a part of something to survive and to contribute, but they also need to be more than some kind of piece of a machine, right? So there's this sense of understanding how people really work. That's important principle of building as well, to knowing what the parts really are, and that they're more than parts or people, right? And I love how you also said that the goal of business is to flow into something, not itself, but beyond itself. I really love those principles, and we'll, if we have time, we'll hope to chat a little bit about how we're doing that at C.A.R.s as well. So, anyone else? What are some principles, Chris?
I just think acts of service, and service to people is a keystone part of business that most people overlook. Even if it's a product, you're selling out of service.
We're still doing that. That's right.
Yeah, it's in our human nature to want and need that human interaction. So, you know, I love the car industry because it caters to, especially restorations.
Yeah,
it caters to people's needs, their wants.
Yes.
You're able to bond with somebody by providing a personalized service.
Yeah.
The products too. I mean, the more successful the product, it's usually going to be the bond the person has to the product.
Yeah.
So, you know, those things kind of go hand in hand. I mean, I'm not really going to be able to speak on the product side of things because I've been in the service industry. I see it as the service industry. But I get the most joy out of servicing my clients or customers with what I consider my art.
Yeah, that's awesome, Chris. And I love that you bring in the service piece of it because, you know, business, it's always kind of fashioned as goods and services, right? And a lot of people just focus on the goods. Right? They just like, this thing I'm giving you or whatever. And it's like, no, there's this human piece of being a servant to people. You're doing it for someone else, not just to gain something by it. Right? My wife's a therapist, and she gets paid well to be a therapist, but she gets to finish the day knowing that she helped 7 or 8 people who are lonely and broken. And I get the joy of saying, I didn't just study a book and pray. I got to serve a family today to help them in their wholeness. Like, that's a service, not just a good of something you did, right? And when you connect those things together, that's the principle of healthy business and business for life, too, when you put those two things together. And I come from the service side of it more, too, where you see that part being so integral, I think, to conceptually having good business practice in life and in a company. That's great. I love that focus that you bring up.
I'll add another thing coming from experience on the product side is I think that everybody, when they're starting a company, hopes to be like, oh, I'm going to be focusing on my customers. I'm going to be doing what my customers want. I think everything starts there, but it's really who you serve that determines how the business goes, right? It's what's leading the boat that drives the ultimate final destination. And unfortunately, a lot of companies today are garnered by the market. So like stock market, is that once they move and start serving money, which is the only thing the board cares about, is core returns, right? And if you're building a company around core returns, being a public-based company, you are being led by money, and money will always rob people. It'll rob your customers, and it'll rob your heart of the company you're trying to build. That's why we've done and taken huge stakes to stay private and make sure that we can hold the heart of our customers and think about people. So when we're thinking about a product, we're thinking about people. We're thinking about loving them. And I think a lot of private companies have that luxury to be able to do that because they're not serving money all the time. They may, that may be the thing that they hold, most dear. But I've heard of so many great leaders from private companies that can still hold the heart of the reason they made the company initially, right? It doesn't have to be robbed from you in the service of the stock market, And so I really love, building companies that way, if possible.
That's great, Josh. And I love, again, when you start to see companies that kind of course correct on that very thing. Like they start out with the focus on, we're going to meet this need, and then they start to grow their brand, but with people they're connected to, then it starts to shape that. But then they kind of lose their way. I saw a commercial one in the company just yesterday. It was a food industry company, and it's clear that they have lost their way. I haven't gone there like 10 years. And the commercial shows the CEO calling customers himself and asking, what do we need to do to improve our main item on the menu? And they go back to say, this is the item you want. Like, it was interesting how and this is a very large company, how they're trying to course correct to getting back to, like, we're trying to serve people here. We're not just trying to make a buck off somebody, right? So again, they were course correcting their major business to try to, we've got to get back to the heart of what we're trying to do here. They lost their heart, right? That's clearly what it showed. They lost their way. And again, part of business is, are we connecting with the people that are part of the business? We're not just serving them, but they're part of us, right? And so that's a connection, a key connection, I think, to building good business, both in your own personal life, but also in corporate work and company work too. Well, why don't we shift gears here a little bit and like, what does it look like to be really poor at building business? On the other side of it, what happens when, what's behind the scenes, or maybe what's obvious when business fails, right? Or when the materials aren't good. Like what happens when, our culture, especially, there might be corruption or something else, like what becomes poor business practices or materials or building blocks that don't come together when it comes to building business and it goes awry. So what do you all think about that, like on the other side of it? So this is probably more common in our culture, right? When businesses are done poorly. So what do you all think about that?
I think the same things that can destroy one's own personal life are the same things that can destroy a company's life.
Yeah.
Think about fear and what it does for employees. If you've got a fear-based management system, then you create an environment where no one feels safe, no one feels loved, no one feels like they're valued, and they're constantly looking over their shoulder, constantly in fear of keeping their job. And that's when maybe it's fear of like the business, like sustaining in numbers and things like that affect that leader, and then it's an avalanche from there down, or big snowballs from top leadership to the next leader. And, I had a leader early on in business, I was asking about a job and he didn't look at the job requirement or what it paid or anything like that. He just looked at the leadership chain and tried to focus on how are they able to handle stress? How are they able to handle fear? Right? So keeping that out of the workplace, if possible, is a real challenge, right? Especially in startups, new businesses where there is a lot of stress and there's a lot of financial things that are hard. That's one of it. Another one is greed. Like you start seeing the money roll in, and then you start operating in ways that rob you or the customer or the experience. And you see this a lot in big car manufacturing, right? Cars are becoming less quality made from the first days, back in the early days of vehicles. It just made them so well. They made them with such quality materials. And we've gotten down to plastics and cheap things that break all the time. Now we've outsourced that to China, which makes them even cheaper. And everything's about shaving a cent off of a switch or whatever that causes the whole experience of the vehicle to, now they're trying to design for obsolescence and in that same modality so that people buy again. I mean, greed can really kill the heart of a company, and it can really kill what you're trying to do in the world, and undercut all of these things that undercut what you're saying. So then the words you say mean nothing, right? They're just empty marketing.
It's just propaganda.
Air. There's no weight to it, right? There's no depth to it. Old vehicles had a weight to them, both in steel, because it was made from quality components, and from design and from hard. Safe, like fear again, safety for design. If you look in vehicles, there was such boldness in the old vehicles. That's why we love them. But then it kind of lost its way and everything looks the same now. So it's like, an amalgamation of all these ideas that rounded it out to look exactly like that next car. Right? To look exactly like that next car and take no risk in their minds. But I think in doing that, they've taken a giant risk. I mean, it just takes one company that's bold to be able to put all of them out of market, out of business. And so I think these things that we do, like greed or fear or selfishness or dishonesty with customers, lying to them for the previous reasons, and all these things that just tear down an individual's own life and credibility are the same things that can tear down a company.
I love how you said also what can tear a company down is playing it safe all the time. There are times to be safe, right, in how you do business and not to be foolish. But if you're always playing it safe, that's not really doing what the work's really called to do. If you're on a mission, it means to go external to yourself, right, and to move forward. I mean, I'm in a service industry called the church, and this is the chronic problem of churches. It's what can we do not to die instead of what can we do to live. The Bible says we are called to die to ourselves in a spiritual sense, but most churches take that to be like we don't want to die financially. Right? And they're always afraid all the time. I'm like, what are you so afraid about? Like, can't you pray? And so again, it dominates a lot of mentalities of leaders from secular or sacred businesses that are focusing on the wrong things, and are focusing themselves around fear, really, or preservation, instead of like, what are we here for in the first place?
Yeah.
So I think, again, losing your way is a big deterrent, because a lot of companies, I think, start out real well. Like, a lot of people start out in many ways real well, right? And then they lose their way, and then things fall apart, right? So I don't think anyone's setting out with marriage most of the time, not always, but most of the time aren't setting out to get a divorce, right? Most people aren't setting out to have a business that fails in 2 years. They're setting out with good ideals, right? But something falls apart, something loses the way. And we've got to think about that. Otherwise, it's going to happen to us, it's going to happen in our own lives too. Abby, Chris, any other thoughts about like what goes into, poor materials and bad decisions that can create bad business or bad building?
As we were having the conversation, I just kept thinking of this show that I used to watch. It was called Undercover Boss. I don't know if
Great
it's
show.
out
Yeah,
there.
it's a great show. I love that show.
But it pulls the CEO out of the boardroom, puts him on the front line of the company, and he gets a one-on-one personal experience with somebody, that's a integral part of either building a product or the service the company provides. Just to bring it back to the ground level sometimes, and figure out what small problems could lead to a big problem. So I don't know. That's just what I was thinking about.
Yeah, definitely reconnecting with the product and the people. That show is very popular. It was on for like 15 years. I love that show. But it shows the disconnect that can happen when someone who runs the business has never even tried the product. Right? Because they're so far removed from the people. Right? So they're just in this one area in a different city, and they just have no connection. So that's what made that show. And I mean, again, it resonated for 15 years with people to watch that over the same formula over and over. So I think you're hitting on something important there. What causes business to fail is the disconnect with the service and the product and the people from the top to the bottom. Absolutely.
I think it's when you think about the principle that Jesus laid out, who's the greatest among you is the servant. Yeah. If you take the mentality that everybody in this company serves me and serves my whims or ambitions, which most leaders take, you fail, because that is not Jesus's model. You're here to serve them. Your mentality should always be, how can I serve them? How can I provide them with better resources? Do they have everything they need? Just like a server at a restaurant, like constantly looking over their shoulder to not to inspect and reprimand, but to serve and enable and equip the work that needs to be done for the company to run to be done. And I think that's a constantly, the Lord checks me and saying, hey, are you serving? Are you actually doing what I've asked you to do? Yeah. And I think that should be the burden of a leader, is to learn how to serve rather than to learn how to be served.
Yeah, I love how you brought up how a good leader in a business, whatever it might be, the main job is to lead, not overmanage or get them to do what you want them to do. There's a give and take there, right? Where you're equipping them. Do they have what they need to do the job I'm asking them to do? It's on you as a leader to provide that and to serve them in that way. Otherwise, the business is you. You're asking them to make you their business. And that's going to cause a failure no matter what. I mean, it might not be today or tomorrow, but it's going to cause a breakdown. At some point. That person's going to lose their heart. They're going to want to not serve the vision of the company. They're going to want to serve you to make sure you're happy, instead of actually serving the greater purpose there. That will always cause failure. Every single time. Have any thoughts that you might have about?
Well, you just
breakdown?
Said, vision and purpose. When it comes to a business or any united mission, like, are you united? Is everybody on board for the mission? Or are you hiring? Like, you look at these big companies, and is it you just hire the CEO because he worked in a totally different field, but was a good CEO.
That's right.
He was a good leader. That's right. But does everybody believe in the mission? Do they believe in the service or the product? Right. Are they all united? Because if you are not united, and if nobody has the same, mission, then you're going to have this disconnect.
Yeah.
You're going to have a high turnover rate. You're going to have people just always in conflict because it's hard to build together if everybody's got a different idea.
That's right.
Yeah, it's kind of like Gideon, right? Like the Lord said, who's on mission here? Who doesn't have fear to go into the battle? I'm going to narrow you down to 300 men. It's better you go to war with 300 people on mission than it is to get all of these others that are second guessing, doubting, and really don't want to be there, right? And I think, man, that would be a great exercise in companies to avoid a lot of failures of these like mass layoffs you're seeing in like companies across the world. I see a lot in Silicon Valley. Like if they would just inventory who's on board and just narrow that way and do a weeding out like the Lord does the wheat from the chaff.
Right.
Get the chaff out and just go with your wheat, because then you'll be able to go to war, right? Then you'll really have people that are on point with your mission, which is it's so good.
That's great, and a great biblical kind of parallel there, Josh, about the connection of how does God see success working. He sees as people who are on board with what he's about and are on board with kind of what their mission is together, instead of we're all using God for our mission, kind of using him, or we're using the business for our pockets, or we're using people to promote ourselves. Right? Like, that's always going to fail. You might get away with that for a while, but that will always destroy whatever it is, whether it's your family, your mission, your job, your company, your church. It will always destroy that. And that kind of leadership, and all you got to do in the Bible is read 2 Kings. Keep that, look at that cyclical effect of this country's here to serve me. God's here to do what I want to do. Give me a prophet who will say what I want to hear. Wow, how did that work out? You got exiled, right? The same thing is true of business or family. You keep using everyone to serve you, you will fall apart in the same stream of business as well. That's not building, that's taking. That's not building anything. You're basically, a parasite, taking from everybody. And really that's exactly what, segue this well to the next point is, that's kind of what sin does. That's what sin is. Yeah. And, I think when we think sometimes we get this emphasized view of sin that kind of gets misplaced in our Christian beliefs, where sin then just makes everything about something bad or wrong when God made it. So we got to make sure that we understand like building and relationships, all the things that God made are good. These are good things. What sin does is it comes into our lives personally and becomes a parasite. And if we don't get that removed, we will die. And it's like when it comes to the creation or business, it's like something that gets into the foundation that causes it to decay. If it does not get fixed, it will fall apart, fall down. Sin is this destructive agent. It is not some kind of thing that's like in itself like takes over or assimilates you, but it can destroy you and it can decay something to lose integrity, right? And that's kind of what sin does. So I think that's why Jesus, I love what he in his most famous sermon, which was probably a bunch of different sermons collected together, but in the Sermon on the Mount, he finishes his sermon by talking about building. He talks about building. And it's really interesting that he ends the sermon on this. It's in Matthew 7. I'll read it to you all. This is what he says about building. He says there's two ways you could build. You can build on a rock or you can build on sand. Now, of course I want to build, but most people don't. So this is what he says. He says, everyone who hears these words of mine, Jesus' words, and does them is like a wise man who's built his house on the rock. The rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew, beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. And the rain fell, the floods came, the wind blew and beat on that house, and it fell. And the great fall it was. So I think this is interesting how Jesus talks about building here. And he talks about building on one of two ways. So what is he calling us ultimately? Like, this is clearly kind of parabolic. What is he calling us to do when it comes to building? And what is he warning us to not do at the same time? Jesus is not just like a Sunday school teacher. He's a prophet. He's warning us not to do something as well. So what are we called to do in building, and what are we called to avoid in building is what Jesus is saying. What do y'all think?
I think you have a choice to either build on the wisdom of men or the wisdom of God. And if you choose to build on the wisdom of men, I think this is where we see the massive failure rates. Is that it's kind of like, hey, let's sit in a room and let's decide what's good. You take a grain of sand, you take a grain of sand, you take a grain of sand, everyone take it with a grain of sand. Like that is essentially how companies are made. And what seems wise to a man is foolish to the Lord. And so, but if we forego that and say, okay, Lord, why don't you just tell me how to do this through your word, right? And then let me take some time to think about how that applies to business. Whether that's just take one thing, loving God and loving people, right? If I pay the proper reverence to God and pray and spend my time and align to Him and love Him with everything I've got, and then you could go to business, I think, on that alone, and then learn everything from that, right? And then, or you could take the other principles that are in the Word about being, being fiscally responsible, being able to treat others well. Just integrity alone, you could build a business on. Just integrity, like that is actually one of our biggest differentiators. Just build onto integrity. Just take these rocks and start setting them at your foundation, right? Like different pieces of the word, and start setting them into the mortar and the brick of what you are building, rather than, hey, this is really hot trend right now, and we should go do this. And if we do our signage like this, and we do this like this, because this is what we're seeing in the world. Then and businesses are built on that all the time, and businesses fail all the time on that same thing. I'm seeing it right now a lot in the AI industry with tech, where companies are like, hey, there's this thing, and this is one little piece, and then those same companies are being displaced like months later now. It's just, the wisdom of men is perishing and fleeting with the wind. Like if you base your entire company off of public opinion, right? Like influencers. You could be popular 1 minute and your whole life can crash the next when that wind blows, or the people's voices are speaking against you, or one little shift in the direction of things causes you to crumble. But if you build on the way that the Lord has called us to be, and then move that into a company, you can take that to the bank. That's a solid rock foundation. I think, in business.
That's great, Josh. Anyone else?
I mean, to have a car analogy, just looking at the different restorations, the different builds that we've got in the Bay, like, you wouldn't look at, if you had two frames side by side and you had like a brand new one, and then you had one that was all rusted out, like, what are you going to choose to build the car? Like, are you going to see a rusted out frame and say, we're not going to do anything about it, we're just going to put brand new paint on the outside, and we're going to do everything great on the body, but leave the frame all rusted out? Like, you wouldn't do that, right? And so that's kind of like, what is the foundation of your business? What is the foundation of your life? Because like that scripture says, it doesn't say if the storms comes, if the wind blows. No, you will have those trials come. You will have the storms. You will have that. So it is your choice on what kind of foundation you have. And that keeping that foundation isn't always the easiest thing, to choose that foundation and to stay on that foundation. But there is a smarter choice.
That's right. It's fantastic. I mean, I think, Jesus is not just, this divine Son of God, character that we kind of grow up believing in. He's a student of the Scripture. He knows the Bible. He's probably referencing Noah's Ark, I would think, here. And he's talking about Noah didn't build the ark overnight. He spent his whole life building it. He was also, it's insinuating there, he's also a really good preacher. But he got fired from most churches because no one came to church and no one got saved. He preached for a long time, except for the animals, but no one came. So it's really interesting. Like, he's this faithful preacher. No one comes to church. No one gets saved. He builds for 120 years, and he just looks like a kook. And Jesus is like, he's going to survive. And it's just interesting how Jesus talks. Like, the way it works with God just doesn't make sense to the human mind if they're not bought into what God's about. And when God's saying, hey, storms are going to come, and if you don't build on me, you won't remain. And there is a warning there, I think, for all of us to take heed, because he's talking to super religious people here. These aren't like a bunch of Gentiles following around. Like, these are the super religious people, and they're building their lives on religion. They're not building their lives on God's word. So I think there's this instance of, like, not just in ministry, but like in everything we do, family life, personal life, job life, all the things we're doing, are we really building it that he is the number one thing? He is what we're about. And we're not using him for something, right? Or using something to get to something. Like, he's the whole reason. I think that's kind of what Jesus is saying. It's that my business is a platform. My family is an opportunity. People are not an obstacle. These are things that God wants me to move towards. And if I will build my life on him, it will look like a house that can withstand the storm that's coming. And again, I not to be doomsday here, but Jesus is basically saying, I'm coming and hell's coming with me, is what he's saying. And we've got to be prepared for that piece of it too, because that tornado is coming through. And if the house is not built on him, it's going to get blown away. So I think there's a sense too, no one sets out to fail in business. I don't think anyone gets married to get divorced next year. But it happens all the time. So there is a way of saying, hey, if this is a rusted frame, I'm going to take care of that first. I'm not going to put lipstick on it and move on.
Yeah.
So I think that's what Jesus is getting after.
Yeah, I think there's a really good analogy here with cars. If you'll just humor me for a second. Chris, can you kind of talk a little bit about the importance of the foundation work you do before you lay paint, and how much of that is of the overall work?
Yeah, absolutely. And even like Abby was saying, it doesn't make sense to do the paint work before you've tackled the frame and the suspension and the brakes.
Yeah.
And I've actually had people ask me to go that route before.
Yeah.
And even against, all the warning I can give, they still just want they want that instant gratification of, something that looks good.
That's right.
And it doesn't take long before they're coming back asking, what should I have done? Yeah. Instead of, making it look pretty first.
That's right.
They should have built the integrity of the car first.
It is, man.
So that it can,
it can accomplish what
you're supposed to do. Yes.
That's right.
100%.
Yeah,
and the same with the sheet metal work. If you're going to skip, doing good work and you can't cut corners when you're trying to build something great. It's going to come and bite you sooner or later.
Yeah, I think just to kind of play off of that, beautiful paint is made from hard, long work, body work, getting things smooth and moving out all the bumps. Getting the imperfections out. And in the same way, the Lord takes a long time with his people. You read that all through the Bible. It's like, how long was Joseph in prison working out his bumps? How long was, Moses in deserts working out his bumps? How long were, Noah before he put him in the ark and, bet all of humanity on him? Like, how long does it take? And I think the body work is not the fun part of your job, right? But the body work we've got to do is long lasting. Before he let me start a company, I spent 10 years doing body work. And that's not the fun part. And most people skip that step and they skip the character work to be able to sustain. And so why did they fail? Because they're going right for the instant gratification. They're going and trying to take shortcuts. And really, the best thing that anybody can do, let's say you're a kid out there that's wanting to build a company and you want to build, start doing some character work right now.
That's right.
Do it right now. Because when, all money does, influence does, is amplify who's already there. It's an amplifier. It amplifies, if you're a bad person, you're going to be a very bad person.
Everyone's going to know about it now.
Yeah, now everyone's going to know about it. If you are
that's the difference.
If you're an impatient person, then everybody is going to feel it in your company all the way down. If you are that kind of person, though you may not view yourself that way, when put in the situations of pressure and test, the imperfections come to the surface and you'll see them. So in the paint, you can't hide bad work that led up to it, right? Well, now it's permanently sealed. Good job. It's permanently sealed. Now we've given you money and you are permanently that way because you're never going to escape that wheel or you're never going to escape the enamel we just laid down. You know, that gets trapped in there whenever you move up. And so the Lord takes a long time with his prophets to show us a way. David in a field, Gideon in a hole. Where does he need to bring you from to help you work out and realize that you need his help to get and move through the body work?
Yeah, I love it. I love how you all bring out what is essentially the final question that we're kind of answering here is, what is the kingdom of God about? Like, how does God build his kingdom? I think, one, he builds it his way, but he builds it slowly and surely. You know, a lot of times we get really enamored by the miracles, and these are important things in the Bible, but those are miracles because they're not common, okay? There's this kind of unique kind of surprise to them and things like this, but God is working providentially, kindly, graciously all the time, but he works through time. He works slowly often with people, not because he's slow, because we need slowness to understand things. You know, it takes us time to learn. And so he fits it to us instead of like, that's just like what God's like. No, he can do stuff immediately if he wants, but it's more to help us grow with him in that sense. And so building his kingdom has to do with refining us, right? It has to do with help teaching us. You know, bringing in someone as a shop hand to the shop, and then they grow to become a master technician over a long period of time, right? Someone who says, well, I preached my first sermon when I was 16. That was a terrible sermon. Okay, that doesn't mean it was a good one. Like, no, you preach hundreds of sermons so you get good at it. It takes a long time. Just because you can talk and you want to be in front of people doesn't mean you're a good preacher. Okay, so like the same is true of any job. It takes a long time. And I love, especially Jesus. Jesus was training to do his ministry for 30 years.
30 years.
He didn't just like, I'm the Son of God, here's my message. It's like, I'm training for this. So it shows the human reality of growth, of building character, of building integrity, of building connection, of learning the product. These things are all important. And with God, it's character-based. And it's the will of God is really the product. It's what does God want, right? And being about what he wants. And I love the focus on you're going to have to go to the woodshed a lot in your life. My favorite character in the Bible that I most like is like Moses. And you think about, he had all the right ingredients to be a great leader from the start. But then he basically said, you know what? I know everything I'm supposed to do. I'm just going to do it without you. And he did it all the right things all the wrong way. All the wrong way. And the first cool part about his story, apart from the miraculous salvation that he had as a baby, but the first thing he does is he goes to Midian as he learns to be a shepherd. He cares for these 7 women at this well. He protects them from these wolves. And he starts to learn to be like ultimately Jesus at that moment. Yeah. And I think, again, it's showing us that what we think is the path to success in building a kingdom is never God's. It's always about, will I sit here and wait to let him lead me, to grow what he wants to give me? It's all a gift, but it takes time and it takes patience and it is character, like y'all are saying. And so the kingdom of God is just, it's not something that you can kind of bottle together and package. And it's a transformational process that we're kind of talking about. And good businesses don't happen overnight. You know, just like anyone's like, it happened, it started in someone's garage, and then happened this, and this happened, and something kind of providential happened. So I think it's interesting how the connections of great businesses in the kingdom of God kind of work through character-based things. Mainly. Yeah. So, well, y'all, thanks so much for a great discussion this morning. Go online to crossautomotiveroyale.com. That's where you're going to find questions that we'll answer for business inquiries. Also, any questions you have about ministry opportunities. Again, we're kind of a business in a ministry at the same time. We have partnership opportunities there for you as well. And then just get online and leave comments on our podcast. We'd love to engage with you as well. Well, I want to thank Joshua and Abigail and Chris for joining me this morning. Great episode, y'all. Wish we could even talk longer, but we'll have another episode to talk. Yeah. So we'll talk again. Hope you all tune in then.